Welcome to the Sales Mindset Podcast. I'm here today with Brian, of course. I'm Dr. D. Dennis. Brian, let's start with our question.
Yeah, so today we are going to be talking about how can sales professionals enhance their problem-solving skills to better connect with their clients.
Excellent. I love this question, and it requires a little bit of a lead up for this particular question. The thing we need to really talk about is, why do salespeople need problem-solving skills? So we've got that typical idea of a salesperson just going out there and pushing your products on someone, and that's not how a good salesperson is supposed to operate.
Sure.
So when it comes to what a salesperson is, think about a salesperson as a problem solver. If you are a salesperson, you are a problem solver, not a problem creator.
Yeah.
And so if you're selling financial products, how are those financial products going to solve the problems of the customer that's buying them? If you are selling, we were talking about the kegerator and everything before the cameras rolled. If you're selling beer, how is the beer going to help that restaurant or that store serve their customers better? So it's all about solving that problem. The problem is that increasingly, anecdotally, so there's no research on this, but anecdotally, people feel that there's less and less problem-solving skills. I was recently at a conference where we were talking about that. It was an educators conference, so we weren't talking about it in terms of our own issues with students, more about how do we solve this particular problem. And where it came from is that the recruiters, the employers, the people who are hiring the salespeople were frustrated with college students not really having the analytical skills, the ability to solve those problems.
Sure.
Why is that? And in my mind, and as I was discussing it with these other educators, so what I did is I took it back to the early 2000s in a federal initiative signed by Bush Jr. called No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
And No Child Left Behind had the best of intentions, but what it really did is it started relying on this idea of standardized tests. And so now you're teaching to a test instead of teaching thinking skills. Thinking skills, you can teach it, you can grade it, everything necessary, but you can't do it on a larger scale. So I think about it as myself as an instructor. In any of the courses I've taught at the college level, I can either, if I'm dealing with a large amount of people, I don't have the time nor the teaching assistant staff to grade open-ended questions to really evaluate someone's ability to think through it. Plus, there's such an excessive reliance on rubrics these days.
Yeah.
Rubrics don't really encourage critical thinking skills. That's why in sales management I never use them.
Yeah.
Because now you have to think on your feet, and it's tough for students to be like, well, how come this person got this? What about the subjectivity of it at all?
Yeah.
I'm trying to see how well you can peel the onion.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to teach everyone. So how do you do it, and how do you do it for yourself?
Yeah.
So that's the real trick here. As an educator, I know how we're going to look at addressing it when it comes to our students. But if you're self-learning, what you really have to do is start to exactly that. Start to teach yourself these particular skills. Start looking at problems and think about different ways that you can solve those particular problems. In higher education, our biggest benefit is that we have these case discussions from Harvard that I can guide students through. But look at the news and look at things that have happened. So, example one, Wells Fargo, which I use to teach in class. What went wrong at Wells Fargo? For the listeners, what happened at Wells Fargo is that the salespeople, the loan officers, the people that you probably don't think about as salespeople, but are in fact salespeople, they had an excess quota. And because of that excess quota, they were opening up these accounts. The CEO said 8 is great, and having background in finances, in financial institutions, 8 financial products is a very unreasonable amount of financial products for a customer to have. It was 8 is great. And great. Why did you pick it? Because it rhymed.
Yeah.
You combine that with an aggressive, so by itself probably wouldn't have been a big deal, but you add to it the aggressive nature of what the community bank structure had caused, in addition to not having a good team, good people are going to leave, the bad people are going to stay, and so forth.
The brain drain.
So what we do in class is we look through that. Now it's a management problem there. Mm-hmm. So what do customers usually have? What type of problems do your customers usually have? And how can your products actually solve them? When I talk about sales, and when I teach sales either with individual workshops or in class, I teach insight selling, challenger sale, and it's really about asking the questions and learning how to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to assume that you know what the problem is. You also don't want to assume that the customer knows what the problem is. And that can be a big problem sometimes, no pun intended there, where the customer thinks this is the problem, and then you say, great, I've got this product that'll solve your problem, but what happens when it doesn't solve your problem? Mm-hmm. So as a salesperson, especially in this modern age of artificial intelligence and everything coming together being about the customer, you want to make sure that the customer's problem is actually their problem. Now, a lot of that might be dependent upon the industry that you happen to be in. We're selling sales training, for example. I have to make sure that the people that they're hiring actually need that type of training, need the mindset. There's plenty of evidence that people do need those mindsets, do need to see what they need to be successful, not just in sales, but everything else that they do. But if they're not hiring properly, so I'm going to have to ask questions if they're going to buy some of this stuff and say, well, before we sell you this seat for this training course, or before I come in and do a 2-day workshop, tell me how you're hiring people. Tell me how you're already training them. Because if they're not hiring based on soft skills, if they're hiring based on hard skills,
just reading a resume and picking options, just hard experience.
Exactly. So I'm going to have to sit down and say, well, my course is not going to help you because it's not going to fix this problem that you don't see that you're hiring the wrong people.
Yeah.
And so, and you can look through different areas as well. If you're a financial advisor, if you're selling investment products to someone and they aren't spending properly, or they're not, they need guidance somewhere else, that's going to be a problem because your financial products might not solve that problem either. So really, you've got to look at that. When you're a new salesperson in those industries, it's probably going to be a little harder, and that's where mentoring and however you're getting trained on those products, they should talk about some typical customer problems, but also typical customer problems that aren't there. So hopefully the training is there that you're saying you need to ask these questions and you need to probe deep. So all of that's to say, my answer to that question is learn how to ask questions to discover what the problems are, and continue doing what you can to help yourself learn how to dig deeper. It's going to require a lot of reading. Realistically, if you want to be a successful person, you're going to want to be a problem solver in any field that you happen to go into. And part of that, one of the mindsets, it's not taught in the course, but one of the mindsets, one of the soft skills, one of the business competencies that's really important is to be a lifelong learner, to be reading and constantly learning so that you can think through problems with new approaches.
Sure.
I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot to unpack on that. A few different things that popped into my mind. But one of the biggest ones is coming down to the actual path that you take in employment. Let's saying you stick with a company, you're loyal to a company, and you stay within it. Just as an obvious, matter of fact, in front of your face statement, the people who are in charge are the ones making decisions and thinking about how to make decisions. And then people who are coming in as temp work, or they're just clocking in 9 to 5, they're following orders and they're making only the small decisions that they have to control. And if you stay in a sort of atmosphere where you're just going to clock in and do your job, whether it be on an hourly job or even just in your daily life, even if you're an entrepreneur and you're saying, I'm going to sell these items to these people and I'm done with my day, then you're not going to get any further in a ladder, as opposed to being able to learn how to make decisions, learn how to ask questions. And part of the training process, we actually just started training a new person at my realty job for working the desk, is I hate saying, do this, do this, do that, do that, because they're just going to remember how to spit up the facts of how to work in the day, as opposed to, I want you to understand how every department handles what you do after you do it.
Mm-hmm.
That way, if somebody calls with a question that maybe you've never dealt with before, you're able to make your own decision on it. You don't need to ask for help. And it sets somebody up for leadership in their field, in the job itself, room for growth, as well as allows people to feel a little bit more connected to their work and they want to be there, as opposed to just, again, coming in and clocking and taking orders. So part of the process with the realty job is people leave Zillow listing inquiries where they go on there and they say, I'm interested in this house. Can I see it this week? And it pops up in our system, and then you get their information. The front desk will assign it to a leasing agent who will then go after it. And instead of saying, all right, get on there and send them this pre-written text message and click assign to this person and just do that every day. Like, I want you to understand the life of this lead, like what they're going to do when they get it. That way, if somebody calls instead of leaves a message on Zillow and they say, hey, I was trying to get in touch with this leasing agent, but I haven't heard from them. Could you help me with that? They're like, oh, okay, it's in this stage of the pipeline. Let me get with Remy so I can sit down and understand the whole process, and maybe we can get them in faster. It allows them to feel like they're part of the, not the problem, but rather they're part of the system that's making it all work.
So a big part of that is the questions. I mentioned that. But with those questions, being as curious as possible. One of the things that just sparked into my head is when I bought my Jeep. It was such a bad experience. Now, I was ready for it. You know, you teach sales. You're ready for any of the bad sales stuff that might come your way. And he was trying to get to know me, but he wasn't asking questions that were appropriate for a Jeep. So some of the things that are important to recognize for Jeeps is that they are very loud. Even the modern Jeeps are still much louder in how they handle themselves compared to a nicer car. They don't spend for that much. So they also have maintenance issues. They have their things. You buy a Jeep, you want to understand that. So going into it, he was asking all about me, but he never asked why I wanted a Jeep.
Yeah.
Why did I come in for a Jeep? Because if I said, oh, they look cool, maybe you shouldn't sell me a Jeep, or at least put all the warts out there.
Yeah.
Because now it's going to generate trust in that it's like, are you sure you want to buy this vehicle? Because it is a loud vehicle, and you're going to have trouble talking to people on the phone with it. If he had a good conversation with me, he might say, how often do you speak on your phone? You've got to be curious. You've got to learn how to stoke that curiosity and ask deeper questions. What else? Tell me a little bit more about how you're going to drive it. Okay, you're going off-road. Tell me more about that. Learn to be curious, not to the point of annoying. You want to get to that point of saying why, but not so much that you're going to irritate the person. But if you're showing a genuine interest in who they are, to really understand the situation so they make a great purchase, it shouldn't come off as childlike.
Yeah. And the best part of that is not only do you get the sale that day, but you might get any referral work, or you maintain a relationship with them and they come back when they want to buy their next car, or they'll come to the dealership and maybe you have some sort of rapport with them for when they go into the service center. And it's instead of on the first day rushing them through the door and getting a sale, you get to know them, get them the right car. Maybe it's even a better car. You get more commission. Or even if you get less commission or fewer commission, it pays dividends in the long run. You also feel like a better person on the way in.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the opposite of that.
Yeah.
This is the salesperson that just comes in, builds rapport, and says, great, here's a car for you.
Yeah.
Here's all the features of that particular car. This will be great. And maybe they even assume that you're going to want this feature or that feature for something like that. For something like that. It's really vague. But when you're asking these questions and when you're actually problem solving, asking what's wrong with your current situation so that you can position the benefits of whatever you happen to be selling to the problems, to the things they don't like. So, and this is gap selling to some degree as well. I know another person that just says expand on the pain. It's like, well, you said you didn't like, if I was buying another Jeep, for example, you said you did not like how loud it was in that vehicle. Maybe you should have a vehicle that's quieter. Imagine if you're on the phone with an important client and they keep saying what.
Yeah. So that's kind of the same concept of like the sell me this pen. It was like thought experiment where the trap, I think it's a silly game too, but it's a silly game. But conceptually, if you want to take one thing away from it, where the wrong answer is anything but why do you want a pen? Or asking questions, rather. The only right way to win the game is to start asking questions as opposed to offer solutions.
Yeah, and I think that I hate it. It's an interview question that some companies do it. It's a ridiculous interview question because how many possible questions can you ask about selling a pen?
Yeah, it's a very short window type of thing. I think it's more of like that first answer thought experiment. It's do you understand the concept of selling something?
Yeah, and the right answer if someone says sell me a pen is to say do you need a pen? Do you have a pen? Do you like your pen? Does the pen, how old is the pen?
Yeah.
What don't you like about the pen? Is it going to run out soon? Can you refill the pen? Does your hand hurt if you're writing with the pen for a while? It's also a question that definitely gets away from the fact that we have laptops these days. So
don't use a pen as much as before.
Exactly.
Right?
So the idea of writing and it hurting can be an issue. So especially if they're like, sell me this pen.
Yeah.
It's
like, oh, we already have it.
It's a bit contrived. So when it comes to problems though, it's learning how to ask the questions and learning how to be curious, I think, is the real short answer of that. But underscoring that, especially if you're just graduating now, and this is not meant to be a generational thing, it is very likely that your schools may not have prepared you to be an analytical thinker, to be a problem solver, and it's not your fault. It's I guess that was right after I graduated college, so it's the people who supported that initiative's fault. And again, it was brought up with the best of intentions, but nowadays we don't think about second and third order consequences and things like that, and we wouldn't have even known. That's just how these things go.
Very immediate response type of situation. I actually have two thoughts on that. The first one, so a fun game that I used to like to play when I was doing the ad agency, when we would go on to interview somebody coming on. I did it for the sales positions, but also just any position, because it's in the advertising field, the entire thing is problem solution, where why are we posting this? Why are we going to run this ad? Why do we want to contact this publication for a press release specifically? It's, what do you call that Cornell note-taking style? Why solution? I always like to ask, not sell me this pen, but I'd ask them, like, oh, what's your favorite color? And they would say their favorite color. And I would say, okay, cool. Now let's pretend like we're not an interview anymore. Like I'm your age. So to speak as casually as you want, tell me why your color is better than my favorite color, which is white. And then we would just like argue back and forth for a minute. And I like to see how like people would argue their color. Only one person ever said, why is your favorite color white? It only happened one time. Remember, I was so excited. I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Nobody's ever done that before. Everybody says, oh, well, yellow is the color of the sky, and that makes you happy, and, to start running on with their own thing, or maybe somebody would get to it eventually. But it was always really fun, because even if you didn't hit the why is your favorite color white right out of the gate, hearing why somebody justified their answer, or just how casual somebody was comfortable being after that moment. Because one guy went, my favorite color is red. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's have our argument. He's like, well, red is badass. I'm like, oh wow, that's crazy. You opened really strong on that. I wasn't ready for that. And it's fun to play the game.
That's it. You get to see the confidence.
Yeah.
2.
Yes, number 2, if I can remember. Oh, when it comes to the analytical thinking, is viewing any problem as that Cornell note-taking style, I guess, that shows up in your daily life or work life, specifically in this case, or sales purposes, is what got drilled into my head taking like advertising classes in school. I took very few of them. I was a business major, but took marketing related classes that kind of went hand in hand with that. And then working in an advertising agency was the way that we started a campaign, or the way that we started an account, was almost like a SWOT analysis, where what is this business right now? What are they looking to do? How do they want to grow? What are they trying, kind of outlining all the potential problems, all the weak points, but all the positive points and the things that make it unique. Like we would build a guide about the business and understand it. And then we would say, anytime that we'd go to run an ad, why are we doing this? And what I liked to do was almost have a few, like 1, 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter, like bullet points of objectives or reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, we're trying to funnel more business owners to look at this realty company, right? First, just as an example. So specifically, we want to target owners and generate awareness. Like, that is a reason. And then when you go to post something, ask yourself, is this reason 1, 2, 3, or 4? No, don't post it. Or why are we posting it at that rate? You shouldn't be doing something just to do it. And it's kind of viewing any problem the same way, kind of giving like a sort of SWOT analysis to any situation. I think that's the best way to practice analytical thinking, is asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Or why am I making this action?
That's actually good. I had a conversation with someone that wanted to start up a social media account, and I'm like, why? SWOT analysis, if you've not known, is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, just for the viewers, listeners. But I have actually not heard of this Cornell note-taking style.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's very outdated now.
Okay.
It's definitely like an old school thing. We did it in elementary school for some reason a couple times, just to practice for when we get into high school and we actually do that, but nobody ever did that. It's basically, you have like a T-chart where when you're taking notes, the left hand is what, and then the right hand column of the T-chart is the explanation, and you write it as a question. So it's, you're learning about the Aztec Empire. It says, when did this happen? So-and-so BC to these dates, or whatever. It's a really weird note-taking style. I honestly don't really understand the practicality of it very much, but for some reason it's stuck in my mind.
I think when you relate it to sales too, when you look at any type of framework or methodology that helps people think about ways of doing things, I think is simpler. Instead of just saying, take notes.
Yeah.
Here's a method of
Here's a
taking
way to do
notes. Yeah. So, excellent. So, problem solving is not, how to train yourself in problem solving is not something that is necessarily an easy answer. But if you can train yourself to ask the questions, to probe, to be curious, you can definitely learn how to do it. And that's my final thoughts. Brian, any final thoughts from you?
No, I don't think so. I think that the best thing that we hit on is that it absolutely is an improvable skill.
Definitely.
I think is like underwritten. I think people connect their intelligence to a certain level, but everything is improvable.
And honestly, I don't think there's very many unimprovable skills when it comes down to it, as long as you want to improve them. Great. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.